What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Alex here from AlexFE, and today we have another deck profile. So today we're going to be looking at Varga for Dragon Empire. First Dragon Empire deck we are checking out for the Divine Z era. Honestly, I feel like this whole set is kind of save standard in my eyes in a lot of different ways. I don't want to go or be too dramatic, but I actually am looking forward to playing it now. And I think that with the Energy Crest, I was a little down on it at first, but I think after playing it, I actually do like it. I think it's a viable kind of system for the game, helps some lower tier decks, helps, the good decks kind of flow a little bit easier as well. So I do actually like Energy, even if it isn't as interactable as I might possibly like in terms of what your opponent can do with it. But overall, I am super happy with this deck. I really think this is a good cross between a more aggro style, also a more just defensive, laid back, just do what the Vanguard's going to do and just survive the whole game. This deck kind of does it all, in my opinion. Has a bit of an early rush game, has a bit of just on hit pressure, and in more ways than one. So I don't think anybody's quite had the same exact list as this. I don't think I've seen it anywhere. I didn't net deck this one. I just kind of found ideas and put them all together. This is kind of where I've landed at. This is what I really do like for this over here. So going right into it, let's start off. Obviously the ride line, you can use any grade 0 you would like. Over here too, the Blazing Bar Dragon. So basically when you're rode upon by the grade 2, you get to call this card to rearguard circle and soul charge 1. So soul is kind of important for a little bit later into the game. Not uber important, but it is good to have soul. Also during your turn, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its name, this guy gets 2k, so making a 10k column, which is actually pretty good. Becomes more that it helps you reach certain thresholds. Essentially, this card is great for the early game, just giving you that early rush. If this is only body you can commit to board, so be it. Just push your opponent as much as you can because you are trying to get to them to 4 damage as quickly as you can. And over here with the grade 2, same deal. When this unit is rode upon for grade 3 with Varga in its card name, you call this to rearguard circle. So again, you're creating an entire column, and on top of that, this is also generating new resources because auto on rearguard circle, when this unit attacks a Vanguard, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its name, he gets 5k until the end of battle, and then at the end of battle, retire this unit and draw a card. That's not too bad because we're going to get rid of our front row anyway. The card draw is amazing for that. But Varga himself over here, when this guy does attack a Vanguard, you get to counterblast 1, retire all of your and your opponent's front row circles, or all the rear guards on them, and then you get to restand this guy -2 drive. So that in and of itself, even going early, I mean, for just a counterblast, gives you a whole lot. Just another Vanguard swing off of, let's say you rip 2 triggers. It's nothing to kind of laugh at. It's really actually pretty threatening. And if you wanted to get the Divine skill off, if you are going second and you have the possibility to get it off, what it basically does is auto on Vanguard circle. At the end of battle, each unit attacked a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, or unit, I'm sorry. If your opponent's damage zone is 4 or more cards, you get to CB1, restand it, and basically go ahead and get drives back onto your Vanguard. So 3 Vanguard swings. There's a potential for 4 in this deck, but that's not the build that we're running. I don't believe in using that over trigger in here. No spoiler alerts right there. But honestly, just having a good early game for this, having putting yourself in a position to get your opponent to 4 very quickly will help you win the game. And I think just this has the juice to kind of go throughout, and so long as you have a couple counter blasts, I think you can actually actively use this deck and just really last throughout the game. It doesn't scale as hard as some of the Stride deck sets, obviously, but at the same time, you're putting a little bit more pressure up front, and it's a bit harder for your opponent to maybe guard some of your earlier turns. So before we hop into this, I'm just going to ask you guys that if you are interested in purchasing any of the cards you see here today, do use my TCG Player affiliate link down in the description below. Absolutely no cost to you. Go get your cards. It does help me out. It does cost you absolutely nothing. I definitely appreciate it. Thank you in advance. Also, if you guys are interested, leave a like on the video. Possibly consider subscribing to the channel if you are enjoying my content. But let's hop into the main bulk of the deck, and I have to kind of go over just the theory crafting, I guess, of this first, because you're going to notice there's something missing that most other decks do have, and we'll get to it in a bit. But I think that this deck has to apply on hit pressure early in order to not only gain resources for yourself in the form of card draw, but a little bit of removal, also just getting stuff away from your opponent's hand. They have to guard things, they want to be motivated to guard things, and I think a certain key card in here really does help change the flavor of this deck and some of the playstyle. So let's get into it. 3 copies of Persona Ride, nothing really too much to get into over here. This guy over here, how do you say this? Abdurasi Galglaive Dragon. I just can't even read. I'm fucking blind. Excuse my language. Continues on the front row circle. Essentially, if you don't have a unit with the same name in the front row, it gets an extra 10k. Cannot be retired by card effects, so your Varga will not be able to affect this. If you have a grade 3 or greater with Vanguard with Varga in its name, also, this guy does get boost. 13k booster is always solid. Doesn't have shield, but doesn't really necessarily need to. We have so many other cards possibly giving us defense, and I'm just running it at 2. I know some people run it at 3. At 2, I think I see it often enough. You see once per game, it's absolutely fine. I think it's good as is. This one over here too, this is an interesting card, Drag Ritter Shura. So Shura is like 100% needed in the deck, but it's kind of annoying that it does use a counterblast because we don't have any counter charge in the deck. We're not running a build that uses any of that. I don't think any really like topping list does use that, so to speak, but does use energy blast also, which is pretty good. So when this guy attacks, you can EB2, give it 5k, and then choose one of the other rear guards that gets the red text then that basically when this unit is retired from rear guard circle, put into your hand instead of retiring it. So this pairs up really well with something that might have popped out of the ride line, something that does retire itself, like the Brachiosaurus, like anything else we're about to go over here. That extra 5k does make a difference in the long run. Also, if you have 2 of these units, you can get your 5 attack turn off if you have spare counterblast for it. I would say just make sure you're going to try to close the game out on that turn, because otherwise you're going to really leave yourself short of counterblast for the rest of the game. But when this unit is retired on rearguard circle, from rearguard circle by the ability of your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its name, your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, you can CB1, coolest card to rearguard circle. It gets an extra 10k, so if you Persona Road plus this, I mean, that's like a 30k beater, possibly 35k, just hitting like pretty sweet numbers. And again, your Vanguard is like the real main threat right here. If you are using the Divine skill and you're swinging that second time, you could potentially put triggers on a standing unit like this over here that has replenished itself back to the board. So your multi-attack through this, if you have 2 counterblasts, you can use both copies of the Shura CBCB, pop them both back down. Not to say the first skill is not going to give you know, the go back to hand kind of skill to its own name. So yeah, going through it over here to Drag Ritter Fallheart, just a cycler. It just really makes the deck flow so nicely. The second skill is decent as well. When placed on rearguard circle, if you Persona Road, you get to either CB1 or Energy Blast 3. Choose a grade 1 card without Sentinel from your drop, call it to back row rearguard circle. The grade 1s will then go ahead and kind of give us the ability to draw and just create more pressure, more power on the board, which I really like. 3 more copies of the ride line. It's pretty rare that we see ride line copies essentially go and be in a main deck, but this card is so good. Gets you that card draw for free, almost replaces itself in hand, gives it that 5k, does everything you really want to do, and I think that this is a easy include at an extra 3 of. Something that's a little techie over here, Heat Stamping Dragon. I've seen a couple builds, I think, with this over here, but it's not so popular. Basically, when your Vanguard attacks, your opponent has 2 or less rear guards, you put this into your soul, choose one of your Vanguards, gets 10k until the end of turn. This honestly feels like if you're going first and you're on your first Varga swing, this is really where I found that this really comes in handy the most, in that you go from a 23, let's say you drove 2 blanks, like whatever the case may be, you're still like 33 over here. Like, that is, I mean, even before you swing for the blanks, let's say, like even restanding just 33, another attack, like is pretty hard. Just getting your opponent in that position for the later game, and even in the later game, it still feels good. So replenish the soul, gives your Vanguard some power, vacates its circle. It feels really nice overall. This is where the big change is that I'm running that not a lot of other people, I guess, are running. Brachiosaurus, I feel like in this deck just feels so natural in my opinion. This is a card that can get you that advantage a little bit earlier than another grade 1. There's that restanding grade 1 that whenever something restands, you are able to retire it, draw a card. I know it has good synergy with the other grade 2 cycler, but I feel like early game, I'm immediately getting an 8k body out of my ride line. I pop this down, 18k. My opponent no guards the Vanguard. I hit a trigger, you know, crit on Van, you know, all effects over to, I mean, all the power over to my Brachiosaurus. A 28k column with an on-hit retire draw, like, just feels really nice, especially kind of just helps with when your opponent is rushing you down early. Against every other deck but like Luard, it kind of feels good. I just think that this kind of slots in that nice in-between spot where you might have seen on Demios on Twitter, my buddy Jake, he ran like a mono red build. He's been trying to, I guess, coin a phrase, whatever you want to call it. And it's super aggressive. This kind of is that midway point where, like, yes, I'm still aggressing early, but I'm not giving up the fact that I am able to get resources. I'm able to introduce a little bit more control into the game, maybe some pesky back row units, things like that. So I do like this. This is kind of that in between. Completely up to you which direction you want to take that. If you want to take this out, I would put in 4 of those restanders if you wanted to play that more passive game. I just feel like this helps us, like I said, set up and get more onto our opponent, more damage, more pressure, more cards from their hand, whatever you want to call it, earlier into the game. So I'm running at 4 of. I want to see this early. It's not a mulligan target necessarily, but it's always great to see one of them in your hand early, just to make sure that you can aggress in that early game. A great support card over here, Impale Horn Dragon. Impale Horn Dragon basically boosts your Vanguard for an extra 15k, as well as Soul Blasting to retire it and drawing a card, so it gets you that card draw. It always puts pressure onto your Vanguard swing. When it's behind your Vanguard, you can do that Soul Blast draw, and it gets an extra 2k, so 5k booster. If it's behind other rows, like, I don't typically like to put it there, but If you want to, you can put it there and just become that 13k booster. But 15k, 23k, you know, Persona Ride 33k, all of a sudden add 15k to that, you know, you're looking at 38, 48 respectively. Adding a trigger into the equation, you're starting to get to like very annoying numbers overall, and just like basically PG or die kind of territory, and especially in a deck that plays through the Vanguards, multiple restands in a very like passive, easy way, easier than like Overlord, let's say. It feels really, really good. So this is a great support card over here. We are not a grade 4 deck, so we are running 3 of the Sentinels and then 1 of the Elementaria over here. We are also, like I said, just I think that this deck kind of plays itself in a lot of different ways, and I'm putting more emphasis on the on-hit pressure with Brachioforce. That's my change, but I'm also kind of including some defensive options, just because I know if I last throughout the game, I think I can really, like, any turn could spell doom for like my opponent. I just need to get to that turn. And I think that Varga is just inherently, as a Vanguard, so powerful that cards like this over here that give you that extra 15k shield are very powerful and kind of just help you get to that, you know, extra 15k, making a 20k shield, helps you get to that later game, helps you get to those extra turns. You know, this is one of those make or break cards that sometimes come in very, very clutch. It's also really nice too, because when this guy is placed, it doesn't say from hand or anything like that. You can then draw a card. You should be soul blasting out most of your ride line anyway. The ride line should be like retired, you know, things of that nature. So you are totally cool with putting 2 of them back into the red deck. That shouldn't be an issue. It also has a cool synergy with this over here. When it's placed on the Persona Ride, you can call this back to the field, and then you draw a card. It's not as powerful as some of the other stuff, but at the same time, I just kind of like that, and I like the fact that I can call this down, retire, boom, call it back down. Like, you get some more recyclability out of this. It's not just like upon restand, so to speak, so it could help you extend your play a little bit earlier, and for those reasons I'm kind of keeping it in the deck. Over here, just essentially, I wanted to try this instead of the restander. You can put the restander in here too, like I said. You know, that is typically what most builds, I feel like, prioritize that over this card, but this is a really great card too. This one was support for, what is it, Gandiva. At the end of battle, it boosted if any player's regard is retired this turn, so even if yours, you get to bind this unit face down and draw a card. I like this for, I think if I'm going, what is it, second against Shiranui, and I don't want to commit anything, give them anything to dominate upon ride or when the ride phase starts or whatever. I essentially have no normal units in my drop. I pop this down over here, it binds out. It just, it's very few and far between when that's actually going to come up, but I just kind of like this card, and you could do the regular, the other restander too. Like, it doesn't really matter either way. The only reason I think this is also a little bit better is because if you don't have a counterblast, you can't even do the Varga skill. This guy just self-retires, like, without a counterblast or anything, and it will still proc this over here and get you that draw. So doesn't necessarily need the restand. Again, few and far between, completely your choice, flavor, whichever one that you want to do. You can totally do that. Getting into the trigger, or actually, let's go over the orders now. Gratis Gradal, so I don't think it's debatable. You kind of need to Persona Ride in this deck to close out. I think that this is a great card to do that, and I think that, yeah, basically having 4 copies of Persona Ride in deck is mandatory. I don't think it's worth running a lot of the other Regalias pieces. They don't really care about your rear guards. Your rear guards are like killing themselves anyway, so I guess if it was like, again, 1000% Shiranui meta, like maybe Angel Ladder, but aside from that, it's fine. Also along the line of just surviving to late game, this over here, Defensing Roar, I think when you are choosing to run at least one of the effect heals, it's always good to run this over here, just because you can get like a 25k shield just recycled very easily, 35k actually with the initial swing over here. So again, it's 15k plus the 10k from this guy. It makes it a 35k shield. It's just a hard number that really doesn't exist in this game outside of this like one interaction. So I personally do like it. Again, if you want to defend with something like this right here, if you have the ability to, go ahead. I think we just have pieces we want back in our hands, so Defensing Roar helps us get to the late game and helps us potentially win. And also, like I mentioned, Elementaria down over here, don't really need an explanation for that. 8 crit, that is the maximum we can run, one of the blue OT, just because, again, we're winning through our Vanguard. We have to pressure, we have to make sure that we're getting crits onto our opponent, making every turn as lethal as possible. Getting stuff back to hand also, like a PG, again, just extending our plays, extending out our turns is very important. You can run fronts if you want, but I think most people do like to run draws just because you are clearing your front row most of the time. You're not just giving it that blanket, you know, front power that you would otherwise get, and other you know, restanding Vanguards, which is like an interesting kind of change, because at first I'm like, oh, with the grade 3, you know, I'm not retiring it, but you don't always see the grade 3, even if you run at higher kind of frequency, so to speak. Fronts I don't think are incorrect necessarily, but I think for the most part draws always feel better. It's good to just have stuff in hand. Draws the shield doesn't feel great right now in the meta, but I think this is just the correct call overall. For 3 other of the vanilla heals, just have to do it. I don't think there's enough variance in the meta right now. You could even run just 4 vanilla if you want to, but I think that the 15k shield is absolutely fine. I don't think there's enough where you can say like, all right, run 2 effect heals, 2 regular heals. I think that just one, whichever way you want to do it. I'm choosing the Restander over here to get that extra 15k, but just for the mirror match, just for what is it? There's, oh my god, there's one other matchup I forget. I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but it's very annoying. Things don't have like a ton of things don't have like a base crit that I really fear, I guess, over here. But yeah, that is pretty much the deck profile. Again, let me know if you guys have any comments, questions, if you think you would possibly change within the deck. Totally let me know. Yeah, definitely appreciate it. And again, if you are interested in purchasing any of the cards that you see here today, we do have a TCG Player affiliate link down in that description. Make sure you use that. It really does help me. Thank you guys a million times over. Also, if you did enjoy the video, possibly consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. So thank you very much. This is Alex from Alex CFE. I'll see you in the next one.